episode
Exciting.
4 of The Craft. We're today with Alexa Wolf. Uh,
Hi.
Hi, Alexa. Welcome to The Craft.
It's good to see you both.
Likewise. I know you and Moanmi probably you guys know each other how?
We met in a
Same
party.
agent?
We
Yeah.
met. We
Oh,
met
party.
in a party in New York. Yes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I don't.
Alexa was the only interesting person in the entire room. So
I was
I,
kind of a similar opinion about you. I think that was definitely, I feel like most of the time when I'm at film parties or networking events, I feel like I always have one conversation that's actually the good conversation of the night. And like, I think maybe it's a little bit of my antisocial qualities, but it's like, oh, if I can find like one person I'm actually really interested to talk to, then I just like stick with them for most of the night because the whole trying to break into new conversations with people just becomes very overwhelming to me.
yeah, that's
Oh,
exactly
it
what
feels like a
happens.
chore.
That's exactly
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happened. We met each other and we stick together for the rest of the party.
But it was great. I was
It
so
was
grateful.
fantastic. It was great. Yes.
Were you guys the only DPs there, or what?
Not at all.
No.
Um, though, I mean, so it was, I don't know actually, are you still at Alexander Creatives, Mummy?
Me? Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah. So we have the same agent. So it was like the agency holiday party. And it's like a below the line agency. So there's like people of all different jobs there, but definitely other DPs too.
Oh, cool.
Um, but honestly, I don't know that, like, I don't know that many of the DPs that my agent reps. So, and we had never met before. So it was like a nice chance to,
Me neither. Me neither. And actually, this podcast is part of it because we never have the opportunity of talking to other DPs. Alex and
You're
I
the
would.
only other DP I talked to.
So Alex and I we talk a lot because we worked together in the past
Mhm.
and we live in the same town. So, but then it's like we were having conversations about making movies and we were like, we wish we could talk to other DPs and see what they think and here we are. So
Yeah, I think I'm lucky being in New York City because there is, a lot of people who live here and that community is a little bigger. And I happen to have quite a few friends who are also DPs or operators. Plus, there's a pretty nice community in New York, especially with uh, like the female and non-binary cinematographers. I think that like is a little bit of an easier like connection point, and obviously there's organizations and groups that are like specifically focused on that, and so that's been like a nice way to have a lot of friends and good conversations with DPs. But I think otherwise it can be kind of isolating because yeah, like usually there's one of us on set.
Yeah, you never get to see any of us work. That was the one like benefit of working with and for Wanmi. I was like, oh man, I gotta watch this dude work every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Wanmi and I were talking about that actually, like that first night we met, because I joined the union fairly recently as an operator, and a lot of my motivation in doing that was that, my goals are mostly in the narrative realm, although I shoot commercial and branded and corporate and whatever music videos to make money and because it's fun too, but like I definitely want to be shooting narratives and working towards bigger narratives. And I really like didn't want to like get the chance at a bigger set like that without having spent more time on them. But when you come up mostly in the non-union crew world, then you haven't really been exposed to just sort of the like system of those bigger projects. And so I was really like, oh, I want to join the union and start operating for these amazing union DPs, partially because I love that job too, but partially so that I can like be around their work. Because it's really hard to get any other chance to do that, basically.
And there's so much more that goes with it. Sorry, I was gonna say just like the politics, the all of that stuff that if you don't get access to it the first time you're the boss, you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, and that's not the sort
overwhelming.
of stuff you want to be being worried about when you finally get that chance. You want to be able to focus your energy on the creative aspects of what you're doing. And if you're just so like thrown off or uncomfortable with the situation or the politics or the managing the bigger crew or whatever, like that's not really gonna, give you the support that you need for the project itself. So that was my theory. I joined the union at a really bad time. So I can't say it's paid off yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah. You came through the ranks? You came before you being a camera operator, did you pull focus and load and stuff like that, or you went straight to operating the camera?
No, I went through the ranks in like my form of that, which, I feel like everybody's got kind of their story with it. While I was still like in college, which I studied film, but at like a small liberal arts school, so not like the best technical background, but I like worked a lot on, I was in the Hudson Valley, so I worked a lot on Hudson Valley like projects while I was there. And mostly then I was camera assisting and mostly first day seeing. And so I started getting jobs doing that like in New York pretty much as soon as I got out of school, because I was already working a bit like professionally while I was in school. But I didn't really ever want to be in the camera department in those positions. I really wanted to be in lighting. And so that was like a bit of a harder transition. I'm like a 5'3" woman. So, you know, like there's great people out there who trusted that I could do it, but it took a little convincing, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but as soon as I got enough jobs in grip and electric, like non-union work, mostly indie features, I stopped camera assisting. And then I did that for quite a few years in the city. Mostly non-union and mostly in the narrative world, but also commercials and some like tier movies. Um, and then I was like really wanted to gaff and was like trying to get bigger gaffing gigs, and it just sort of like wasn't connecting as quickly as I wanted it to, or I sort of felt like the friends who were kind of on the similar paths like seemed to be getting those opportunities and it wasn't really happening for me. And I knew I wanted to shoot, and I was kind of like, do I sit around waiting for these better gaffing gigs to come along, or do I just like, I knew that when I started shooting, I wasn't going to make money for a while. So I was kind of like, maybe it's just better to like do this now, because I'm sure it'll also take a while to like get going. Um, and I did a weird thing. I like me and my partner at the time like took 6 months off and went to New Zealand and hiked like a long distance backpacking trail for 6 months, like the entire length of New Zealand. And this was like sort of when he's a gaffer and when he was like transitioning to the union work, and it was when I was like, okay, this was like a good like break from my career, and now when I come back I'm gonna like rebrand as a DP. So that's what I did, and made no money for a year, but like eventually it started working out.
Yeah, every time you make that jump from like whatever it is, AC to operator to, whatever the next tier, you just know that there's going to be a huge dry spell. It's incredibly intimidating.
Yeah.
I remember I started grip and electric, and it was like, oh, from like grip PA to grip to best boy to keying a show, and then jumping over to electrician, like constantly rebranding is exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why when it was like not quite connecting on the gaffing, because I had done a lot of besting. Um, and I was getting like some gaffing opportunities, but like I, really wanted to be doing features, and I wasn't really getting called for like features that felt big enough to be kind of like worth it or paying my bills. I was like, if I'm just gonna be waiting around for jobs, I might as well be waiting around for DP jobs. Which I don't know. Every once in a while, because I did like love lighting, I not exactly regret that decision, but just sort of like wonder what my career trajectory would have looked like. Because that first summer that I got back and like started being like, I'm a DP and I'm only going to take DP jobs, was exactly when I started getting a couple calls for like cool indie features. Um, like I got asked to interview for Beach Rats, which like I think that movie's awesome. And I have like a friend of mine ended up gaffing it, and I was just like, but it was like right at that moment where I was like, I've made this decision and I can't not do it. So, yeah,
You
you never know.
Yeah, yeah.
you've made lots of short films as a DP.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's the best school in a way. It's
Yeah.
it's the way to it's a great way to learn uh, how to DP uh, more than gaffing or more than pulling focus. I was focus puller for 10 years, and I thought I knew everything. And the first day on set, for me as a DP. It was a commercial, and next the next week I was shooting a movie, and I never went through the short film period. I went from
Mm.
pulling focus to shooting movies, and it was a shock for me. There was
Yeah, I
the
bet.
first week. So, did you do you consider that short film period in your career like your schooling, or it's just something that you did because you had to?
Well, that period is not over in my career, so there's that. Like, I'm definitely still shooting shorts, trying to make them less of a priority and more of a thing I just do when it's a project that I really believe in, or really think that the director is super talented, or, some very good reason to do them. And I definitely don't say yes to the like super bare bones budget ones anymore. Um, but even now, like even after having shot a couple features and going after that work more, I still find them to be a really nice place to experiment. Um, and also just like so much less of a commitment, but still the ability to like dive into a story, decide like a particular visual language for that story, without necessarily having to give up like months of my life to that. Um, so I still kind of love them, even if I wish they paid better. um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely did them to start partially because it was like jobs I could get when I was just starting out. And because I knew I wanted to be in narrative world in general. Um, but I think that like as I got, better known as a DP and my name, was in more circles and I was getting like more offers for them, then it like shifted from being sort of more like a subsistence, like I just really, really need this work because it's the only work I'm getting opportunities to do, to being more of like, no, I really like care about these stories and I really want to work with these artists and directors and um, actually like sort of in some ways grueling but like some of the most fun projects that I get to do. I mean, even just this last year, especially because of the strike, like there was a lot of people making shorts, um, and I shot a couple which were all like interesting projects in their own right. One of which is I just found out today is playing at the Brooklyn Film Festival next. It premiered at Santa Barbara, so that was cool. And I really love that project. And another one that's just finishing up, but was a Columbia graduate thesis that I'm really proud of. It was like my first period piece. It takes place in the 1930s. So I don't know. It's like, and there's such different films. Like, one is like a comedy drama um, about a sort of mother daughter relationship, and the other is like about the scientist that created the basis for solar energy in the 1930s, but is a Lebanese immigrant and is like based on a true story, like, and it's kind of a
Wow,
thriller. So like,
wow.
crazy different projects, and it's just fun to get to do, I don't know, all that, stretch yourself in different directions without like having to wait for an entire feature or something to do on.
So I'm just curious. I've only done a couple shorts personally, and not shot a single feature. So you got me. Um,
They
but
have all been pretty low budget, so
still, it's that's high up on the priority list personally. But when you're doing shorts, I'm sure in the very beginning it was like low budget. Hey, you know, hundreds of dollars, scrap together whatever you can.
yeah.
Do you maintain like relationships with rental houses and say, are you going into it like we're trying to get an Amira or an Alexa or something to make this look good? Or how's the kind of vibe on some of your favorite shorts that you've done?
So on the sort of technical gear front, I'm lucky enough to have been an early purchaser of an Alexa Mini that I have a really wonderful relationship with a rental house called Cinema Vision in Manhattan. And so they've always like housed it, and it sub rents through them. But they're amazing, like very like kind of a mid-size rental house, but like family owned. The owner is amazing, like very supportive of people's careers. And because I've always kept my camera there, like they just have been so supportive of any project I want to do, even if it's really small. And I actually like kind of knew that when the Mini was announced, that it was like, I had a sense that it was going to be like that next big camera. And I was actually still mostly working as an electric. And I bought it then because I had the rental house that said that they would take it. Um, and so I like have had one since the beginning of my career, which is very lucky. Um, and I mean, it was the right call because that camera's been amazing.
Yeah. I'm sure that was
And,
terrifying though initially. You're like, this is a huge investment and I
yeah.
hope it rents.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily, because I could put it at a rental house and because they were so hot when they first, I mean, still, honestly, but like when they first came out, it rented enough from the rental house that it was like paying itself back even before I was using it. And then once I got work where I was making money on it, then I was like, fine. I paid it back in a couple years. Um, without trying that hard, basically. So that was like a very like, I think a smart call, but also one that I was like able to do, which not everybody is. And definitely meant that like, I had a nice camera, but it was also like kind of a catch-22 because on those really, really early projects of short films, especially, like when you get a Mini, then you kind of need like a certain tier of accessories. And
Hmm.
even if you're trying to be as stripped down as possible, like it still just takes something different than like, I don't know, a smaller Sony camera or whatever, like the cost of the accessories you need for a camera build of that weight. Um, and so if not for the relationship that I had with the rental house, like maybe it wouldn't have been as possible. And even still, there were projects that would kind of like struggle with that, really small ones. But so I was pretty like set on the camera gear side of things for those smaller projects. And then because of my days in lighting, I honestly mostly Eastern Effects, which is a rental house here in New York. I had worked with them a lot when I was like besting and was pretty friendly. With some of the reps there, and them along with other rental houses in New York, but especially them like have just also been really, really supportive of my narrative projects and pretty willing to work with whatever budget I had. I mean, still sometimes that's like two lights, you know. Uh,
You can do a lot with two lights
you
though.
can,
Yeah.
yeah. And like oh, what's the saying? Like I forget. Like the idea that, if like not having everything like breeds creativity. What is that actual saying? Anyway,
I can't think of it, but I know the gist of it. Yeah.
yeah, which is true. And I mean, sometimes having those restrictions can, make you choose to shoot something in a way that's actually a little bit different than you've done before. And that can be, a creative piece of the puzzle, or make something have a more unique style to it than, maybe if you had all the tools you would have gone for. Um, so yeah, I've been really lucky with rental house relationships. I feel like that's like one of the things when I'm talking to like people who are just getting into shooting, that is like my like usual like one piece of advice kind of thing is like if you can make good friends with a rental house, like it makes a huge difference. I don't know if you two feel like you've had that experience, but it's definitely been the case for me.
How do you define yourself as a DP? I've seen your work like past 2 days. I've seen like a bunch of like 8 or 9 short films, and 2 of your movies. And actually, it's actually very cool. When we're doing this interview, I get to watch like whoever DP we're interviewing, like all like the majority of them work in like 2, 3, 4 days, and it's super cool to watch stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like you
But
probably have a better sense of who I am as a DP than I do.
yeah, but I want you to to say it. Yeah, but who are you as a DP? Or who you think you are as a DP?
I can guess what I think, and then you can tell me if I'm right or not. um, I mean, I think that I know why I got into it, and I think that still like rings pretty true for me, which is that I have always been like a story obsessed person. I like read so many books as a kid, and still do. and, you know, was obsessed with movies, like knew I wanted to work in film when I was like 10 years old. And I think that part of why narrative projects definitely like draw me more than other things is that like I love a good story and I love like being supportive of that. But I was never that great like in any form of like initiating those ideas. Like I was always somebody who would like edit my friends' essays for school. I even had a job in high school like helping a woman edit her first novel. And I have a lot of like friends now who are directors that I've worked with on projects who then will like send me early drafts of scripts, and you know, not always for notes, sometimes just kind of like to have a conversation about. But I love to like read scripts as they're, you know, being created and kind of like, you know, have a good conversation where when someone's stuck on something. And I think that like I come to DPing very much from like the storytelling side of it. And although I am like most inspired by images, it's actually more that I just really want to be around like supporting a story like come to life, but not be like the person 100% in charge. Like I have zero aspirations to be a director or a writer really. Um, and like in Europe, there's like sort of more like dramaturg role, which maybe if I had been in film in Europe, I would have ended up in that and not as a DP. But I feel like my relationships with the directors I work with, especially the directors I work with multiple times, like ends up kind of in some middle ground. And I love the idea or like figuring out how to be like, what's the subconscious thing we're saying about our characters, what's going on with them, where their connection points are, what the power dynamics are between them, and how is that translating into the visual language, and how are we sort of subconsciously feeding that information to the audience because of the visual choices we're making. So like the tech stuff is fine. I definitely struggle with that more than anything else. Like sometimes I think it's fun, but not to the level that most DPs do, I think. But I love the like storytelling side of it, and I think that shows in my work. um and I feel like it's definitely like feedback that I get from directors that want to work with me, you know, more than once.
It actually shows, and it shows that uh, you try. It looks like you try to be not very invasive with the camera, which is very respectful with the story, and also you looks like you tend to be very naturalistic with your lighting approach.
Yeah, yeah, I
Is
think both of those are true. Sorry, what were you
is
saying?
I know that the lighting part of it, the naturalistic approach, is something that uh, it comes natural to you, or it's something that you've been forcing or trying to uh, go in that direction.
I think it definitely comes naturally to me. I think if anything, I probably am like realizing that I do that a little too much and like could be a little bit stronger with my choices sometimes and kind of get away with it. Um, and so I feel like that's actually like maybe a growth path that I'll go on at some point. But it's also one of those things that I am like so like it actually bothers me sometimes in movies when I get distracted by the cinematography. Like when somebody just decides to do these epic, complicated camera moves, but I don't feel like they're actually supporting the story. I find that like distracting and kind of frustrating, actually. Even if I think the the cinematography of it is really cool, like I can respect that, but I'm like, put that in a commercial, get it out of this movie. It's taking me out of the story. And I think I'm like so hyper aware of that when I'm shooting that it's like almost become a style of like, you know, really making sure that every choice is serving the story and not getting in the way of it. And I think that sometimes that maybe leads to like I think one thing I would like to like grow or just experiment with as a cinematographer is getting a little bolder sometimes than I am. Also, I've worked on a lot of like indie budget stuff, and so there's some side of it too where like I also feel like by fighting really hard to say like have a jib shot or something, I'm also taking money and resources and time away from extra takes the director's getting with their actors or something that the production designer really needs to make the whole set look better on camera for me. And I don't really want to like push those choices unless I absolutely think that they help us tell the story. So I feel like it's sort of a mix of things of why my work has trended that way. But it's also something that, like, for myself, I do kind of want to, like, especially as I get onto projects with bigger budgets and those choices become a little less dire, you know, like experiment with more. And I think especially with like a little more creativity in the lighting, because I think that can be a really good emotional storytelling tool. Um, I also definitely came up in like the Deakins era. Like when I was in school, like I was reading Deakins' website, you know, and that was
Mm.
like, you know, and I was watching all of the movies that he shot. And I think that he, you know, is a master at like naturalism. Not that that's really what it is. And sometimes I get frustrated when a director like will reach out to me, which happens pretty often, where they're like, "Oh, you know, I absolutely love your handheld work and your natural lighting," and then I can feel that the assumption of that is that I don't need equipment
Yeah.
or that I'm not lighting, and I'm like, that's not the case. I'm so
No.
sorry to tell you.
And
Takes a lot of work to make it look that natural.
it's
Yeah.
exactly. It's not just opening the window. Yeah.
No, I'm like, I wish it was, but trust me, it's not.
Yeah.
Has that, from going from shorts to features, has that gotten a little easier? That assumption of like you can do it with less, or have those? It's still been kind of like there's a learning curve here for the producers, directors.
Um, I think that at least on my first two features, because they were so low budget and basically first time director producers, that was still the assumption, and also like a necessity basically of the budget to do it with like basically nothing. Um, my most recent feature just was a little higher budget, had more resources, and also it was the director's second movie, or second feature. So that definitely like helped, and we just had more resources, which was great. Though that one was in COVID era and we had COVID outbreaks and a very short schedule to begin with. So, you know, everything's got its issue.
We remember that well. Do you, I come from I spent years as a camera operator for Mr. Wanmi here. When you on your last two features, did you shoot? Were you single cam? Did you operate the camera? Were you multicam? What was the approach?
Um, so all of the ones I've done have been single cam. And my partner is a DP and operator also, and he works very much in like multicam space a lot. Like that's even on narrative stuff, that's just like the way he came up. And we have this conversation quite a bit about like my insistence on single camera and where it like, you know, where it works and where it doesn't. Um, I think like I think again, just kind of like in that sort of like, I don't know how I learned like with the the look of things like Deacon stuff when I was young. Like it always, even if it wasn't necessarily single camera, I feel like those kind of films really feel that way. And I feel like I was always just like, oh, if I try to bring on another camera, especially on these small projects where I know that that's not going to be a camera with a full team, it's not going to have a full set of lenses, but everybody's going to want to use it. And then all of a sudden, am I compromising my lighting, you know, or the shots because I don't have like as full of a control over like what we're capturing with that second camera, and I just don't want to give them that option. Like, and I think sometimes that's hard because sometimes you miss something really creative or cool that you could have gotten, or you just don't get as much coverage and the editor doesn't have as many options. So I think that I'm like starting to learn that I should think about that more as a tool, because I think there were just a long period where I didn't even consider it, which is crazy because I've shot two features that had like 8-person ensemble casts and 18-day schedules, and were both
Wow.
120 pages long, and we shot them single camera.
Whoa,
Wow.
that's an
Wow.
achievement.
Yeah. So like,
Wow.
you know.
Actually, I think that you said the right thing. Think about it as a tool, because having two cameras doesn't mean that you have to use them all the time.
Yeah.
You use them when you need them. Uh, I mean, it becomes a problem when somebody thinks that because they're paying two cameras, they have to be two cameras rolling all the time.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Well,
But
maybe you're like the tough enough DP to be like, no, not on this shot.
yeah, yeah. But sometimes I try to shoot single. I always have two or three cameras on set because. But I may shoot half of the day with one camera, and then for the conversation of those 8 guys, then I just I drop the second or the third camera. But there we've made a bunch of movies like that with Alex, where sometimes it's a great tool.
Yeah.
Sometimes it as you said, it's decremental for the cinematographers, or it's a balance over there. But yes, I think that it's just another tool.
Yeah. I will say on my last short film that I shot, we shot a few scenes with 2 cameras. And I was like, I did it. We were doing like process trailer stuff. And so for the process trailer stuff, we shot 2 cameras. But that's the first time I've ever done that on a narrative project.
I mean, I actually envy you. I don't remember last time I shot with one camera. And
Well, then you just have to have great operators around, you know?
well, yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, also, Alex, I feel like you, from seeing some of your work, like you've done some of the sort of like second unit and bigger, you know, special effects and driving and that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's where like, yeah, once if at some point I get those kinds of gigs, I'm sure I'll have to like get rid of this rule.
Oh, totally. Yeah, those things where they can only afford to do it once. You're like, yeah, we're putting 6 cameras on this thing. Like, you got to get it. Yeah, but
that's a different deal. That's a
totally
different. That's a totally different animal. Yeah.
No, it's you're capturing a stunt technically, and I'm sure again, even on that stuff, I'm sure Wanmi's over here like, oh God, okay, I wish I was shooting this. I wish I was shooting this. It's just control. We're all control freaks, you know.
Yeah. Wanmi, when you shoot your like multi-camera setups, do you tend to cross shoot or stack, or are you really dependent on the situation? Out of curiosity.
It depends on the situation, but normally, like what I've been doing with Joe Carnahan lately is kind of our deal is that we do the master with one camera, or the moving shot, whatever we do. Like Joe tends to move the camera a lot, so we do that with one camera, the setup of the scene with one camera. And then once the actors are settled and we have to shoot the dialogue, we crisscross the cameras because it's much better for... it's a control environment for me lighting wise, and it's great for the performances, and it's great for the editor, and so kind of I try to have the control on the light when I need to, and give control to the director when he needs to, basically. But yeah, unless it's a very complicated crisscrossing cameras is very complicated and it makes the lighting impossible, and then I will stack one I'll do the close-up. But yeah, that's what I try to do. Not always successfully. Normally, depending on the time of the day, it's like, we have 3 cameras, put 3 cameras over there. I don't care. You know how it goes. But that's what I try to do. And it works for me. And it works for the directors, which is most important. So
yeah, it's I don't know, you were saying we're all control freaks, and I feel like that's such a piece of being DPs, but everybody's a control freak in their own way, you know, or has their own like things about like, this is what I think is like important things to give to the director, and here are the places where like I, you know, will stand my ground that it should be done this way only.
Totally. I mean, the best is when you get into a room with a bunch of control freaks that are able to confine it to their own like individual passion, and it's like, oh my God, okay, that's the best production designer who's a complete control freak, the best special effects guy who's a complete control freak, but they know the limits and the lines and where it all, like you said, supports the story. I think that's the most important thing. Like, I want you to be a control freak, but in service of that script.
Yeah, and it's hard to make those calls on when your budget is tight and, it's like, do I spend this on two cameras? Do we add a day?
Hmm.
Which is actually better? Yeah, and sometimes I don't know. You gotta work with everybody else in the team to make the best call you can and hope that it works.
Yeah, but you said that you are a very storytelling driven
Yeah,
DP, and that's where the answers are, in my opinion. When you ask yourself, is this gonna help the story? Is this gonna help the narrative? Is this gonna help the director tell the story that they wanna tell? I think that when you uh, ask yourself those questions, that's where the answers come.
yeah,
If the question is this gonna look better, the answer is gonna be wrong always, in my opinion.
yeah,
So, but that, I mean, every one of us has a different approach to this business. So, but in my case, and I don't want to talk too much about me, but in my case, I'm like you. I probably because I come from Europe, I am very, very, very director DP.
yeah.
I wanna serve the story before the looks. I wanna serve the story, and so I understand your approach very well because that's what I see too.
See,
Yeah.
I'm just like, it needs to be 12K. It needs to be, no, it's
I mean, there are plenty of very successful DPs who that's how they do it. So, it's
to
not a
each
wrong
their
answer
own.
either. Yeah. And it depends on what you want to shoot too. It's like, yeah, if you're doing like, I don't know, big action visual effects heavy movies and like the right thing for that movie is to shoot with as much resolution as possible so that your post is better for all that visual effects, like maybe that's the right answer. I'm the DP who's
Sure.
always like, I'm going to shoot with the least resolution possible because then that means that in the edit you can't change my shots very much.
There you go. There's a reason. Yeah, I would love to talk to someone who does those like visual effects. I just can't wrap my head around the puzzle that is something like a Superman or something like that, where again we're talking about story and yeah, the story's on the script, but every day you show up and it's just like a tiny piece of a dude on blue or green,
Yeah.
and it would seem hard to kind of sink into and get into a flow, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's joy in the technical process of it, but it
Yeah.
seems like a totally different animal than something like Clear Mind.
Yeah, and it's also like I feel like those movies, I mean, they're not usually my thing, but when you get one where the story is also amazing through all of that nonsense, like that's that must be so difficult to, in exactly what you're saying, to hold on to when you're, just like this much of the script a day and it's all blue for the
Yeah.
actors, for everybody. Um, I don't know. I'm definitely like interested to see the new Mad Max because Fury
Furiosa,
Road was
yeah.
one of those movies that I was just like shocked by how good it was. I kind of like went into it not really knowing that world and not expecting to like feel anything from a movie of like a bunch of cars driving around in the desert in some like apocalyptic future. And then I don't know, that one got me. Um, and I yeah, find that to be a really impressive skill that mostly because it's just like rare.
Sure. Yeah, it's different than just again sitting there and watching like a 6 minute scene unfold and like the drama play out versus like, oh yeah, we've got six cameras on this thing and you're gonna see the explosion and the guy's face go, oh, and that's it.
Yeah. 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 If you can make that and also make it a compelling human story
Ex-
somehow, like,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, I get how you can make a compelling human story of, like, just two people talking in a room. But,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
Alexa, how do you go from paper to screen? What's your process if you have one?
Yeah, I think I have a general one. I feel like I could always be adding more tools to that. I was just hanging out with a DP friend of mine who's at AFI right now, and we were talking a little bit about like pre-visualization tools and some of the stuff and AI, and that I should probably be paying more attention to how that can help my career, and my, especially like the sort of script to screen prep work. I just happen to be a person who hates being in front of a computer. um, but I also try to like let the director drive a bit of that process. In terms of, I just think that like different directors have different ways they like to work. So I'll usually like sort of go into like the early talks being like, this is the way that I tend to do projects. This is the way that, I feel pretty comfortable with, but also like anything that you specifically need or want, like, cool, let's talk about that and make sure it happens. Like I can't draw, so storyboards are not usually a big part of my process, but I love them. And if a director really wants them and we have the ability to get an artist that can actually draw something that's useful, then cool, I'm down. But because I personally have no artistic skill, like not usually a part of what I would do. Um, but I feel like generally it's like starts with a lot of conversations with the director about any visual references or movies that they were already thinking of, especially if they were the ones who wrote the script. But they've always, either way have been attached to the project for significantly longer than me. And so, usually already have some ideas, and I like to start with like where they're already at visually, and then sort of spend some time kind of like looking through all that myself and starting to share things back and forth, and oftentimes with like the caveat that like this image is specifically about framing, or this image is specifically about color, or this is a little bit of this movie where I think that the camera movement is really interesting. And then I think doing that after a while turns into like a sort of bigger and more concrete conversation about some set of rules, rules meant to be broken, but rules about like how this particular project is going to look visually. Any like sort of, and then that becomes like an aspect ratio conversation, maybe even a specific lens conversation, color palette. And usually also at that point, if the production designer is on board, I want to be going back and forth with them a bit, or even the costume designer, so that like everybody is kind of building that visual sense together. And then I tend to do like very detailed shot lists. And if the time allows and the director is interested, I like to do that like as a full like collaboration, instead of kind of like one of us taking a crack at it and then trying to interpret what the other person meant. And that usually comes along with like, ideally, if we're scouting locations too, some Artemis images of maybe particular shots, or reference images pulled that, oh, we're really trying to kind of recreate something with just this framing. And a kind of, breakdown of like what's being covered in what shots. And not every project like that doesn't always work for, especially things that are like, I don't know, handheld and looser, or where we know that there's going to be more improvisation with the actors. And also I feel like plenty of that like goes out the window once you're on set. So like the other thing I tend to try to do is also like have a kind of document that's not as specific as a shot list, but talks about a general idea of the blocking, and sort of like the most important points of the scene. Or maybe like, and sometimes that would be a specific shot, like we definitely need an insert of this hero prop or whatever, but sometimes it's just like we have to get like this moment with this character, so that when, as always happens, you run out of time, like, and you're definitely going to have to throw out half of the things that are on the shot list, like you have this kind of like guiding light of whatever is most important in that scene. So yeah, I do a fair amount of prep, maybe not as much as some people do, and some overhead diagrams too for more complicated setups. And work with my gaffer as much as possible to get like some rough lighting plans. that's about all I usually have any prep time for, and usually that prep time isn't paid anyway on,
Yeah.
these smaller narrative projects. But I find that like I feel most confident going into projects like having done as much prep as possible, and then it's okay if we throw it all out because we find something amazing in the moment or because we run out of time. But I like to have a plan, even if it means like a lot of time on my own to like make sure that happens.
Nice. Do you do any bit of testing as far as like camera lens combos, filtration, working with your gaffer, do lighting tests, or is that kind of something that you just know the tools? Like, hey, it's probably super speeds on the mini with half satin, or like how deep do you get into the tests?
I would love to get in deeper. I feel like often it's just not a possibility to get the resources to do that or the people together. I mean, definitely lenses, I'd say, is the thing that I like look into the most. I don't have a particular lens set I want to use on every project. I really think that that's like a major creative choice I can, make in terms of the look. Like I like to shoot with Arri cameras because I'm most comfortable with them, and I know the sensor well and I know how to expose the sensor. Um, but lenses, I feel like, is like on the camera side of things, like my biggest choice creatively. So, a lot of times that's just unfortunately watching lens tests online because I don't have the resources or ability to look at them in person. But every once in a while, depending on what the lenses are, I'll get the chance to. And I definitely like take that opportunity when I can. And sometimes also for front of camera filtration, I tend to avoid it. I like soft old glass, and the idiosyncrasies in soft old glass, but um, yeah, would usually prefer to do that than to use like some newer, sharper lenses with filtration. Every once in a while
Why?
for commercial stuff and certain projects, because I don't know, maybe I'm getting a set of lenses for free or something, like I'll make a different choice, but that's usually how I go about that. I would love lighting tests too, but I feel like that's one really I don't get any time for ever. But I definitely talk with my gaffer a lot, and I like really like to work with the same crew over and over if I can. Um, and so I think that helps too, because it's like we're not going into this project having never worked together before. We've worked together on a billion other things. And so, my regular gaffer like knows my style, knows the types of diffusion I like, knows the sorts of units that I like to use. But then we definitely have conversations about like maybe the specific needs of that project. Like I shot one short like almost all with dados and it was awesome. I was just like, I just want
Wow.
to try this. It seems cool. And it was
Yeah.
great.
What is what you like of the old lenses more than the new ones?
Oh, it's so hard to like describe lens qualities. I feel like that's, I don't know, maybe you can, but like I feel like
I
it's such a feeling.
No,
I
he's setting you up for failure right here. Yeah.
no,
How do you do that to me?
Alex and I we have these conversations many times, and he's in the old lens walkie images camp, and I'm on the I want my images sharp and nice. So we're different camps.
Few reasons. I feel like, okay, the example I'm going to use for this is Rings of Power. Did either for you watch any of that?
The
No.
first two episodes, yeah.
Yeah. So with these really amazing digital sensors and super sharp new glass, I think that like in that show, I felt like I couldn't enter the show because it was so sharp that like you're supposed to be watching these characters who are like elves, like the most beautiful ethereal people, and I can see like every caking bit of their makeup. And that's kind of like an extreme example, but I was recently actually having a conversation with a DP friend about this, which is that like we were kind of like remembering, I don't know, movies maybe like pre 2010. A lot more stuff shot on film. And that like movies, even if they didn't look perfect or crisp, like had a world to them that you could like enter, and it didn't look like reality, you know. It wasn't like you could see every bit of, you know, the shape of every person's face. um but it like allowed you to kind of like be involved in the story, and for that 2 hours, and then come back to reality. And I think that like that kind of like, some things are too wonky. I find them distracting. I definitely have made the mistake of like choosing to use a set of lenses and realizing that like across the whole project, maybe especially with limited resources, like I needed more focal lengths because now I'm trying to get this shot that I have to get in this, you know, on location. I can't back up far enough. And now there's distortion on the person's face that shouldn't be there. You know, like I've definitely made mistakes with using those older glass in a way that like, you know, is distracting. But I find that like it helps the softness and kind of texture helps create, to me, like a little bit of like magic to the world that doesn't feel like reality anymore, and allows me to like enter the story. And I think that so much of the stuff now that's like very sharp and very contrasty and tends to be graded really, you know, dark and blue or whatever, like it's a look, but it, to me, it's like, I don't know, it just doesn't have this like inviting quality to it that I think existed more in older films than like modern era. I don't know, that's not like the clearest description, but that's the best I can do.
No, I completely understand and agree. It's like when I go through something like Shot Deck or whatever, and I'm looking at stills or prepping for a project, like the stuff I gravitate towards in my favorite movies, things like, you know, American Beauty or Seven, or, you know, some of these films, there's that layer, that filter, exactly what you're saying, where you, like, it's not real. Like looking at you and me here now, it's like, well, this isn't a story, it's just life.
Yeah.
Where I need that filter as a viewer to like get lost and immersed.
Yeah, and I think that like amazing DPs can use those, like especially when they're working with like the best production designers and the best costumes and the best makeup, and like really know what they're doing shooting. Yeah, you can shoot stuff that's really sharp, that still has that quality to it. But I feel like I see so much stuff that isn't that, you know, that feels more like watching a Zoom call.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, what has really changed is the sensor. It's not the lenses. The problem is in the sensor. The problem is that we're shooting 8K, not that we're shooting with master primes, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
No, I agree.
So
I would be much more interested in shooting on sharper lenses if I were shooting 35 millimeter.
exactly. I mean, I have the feeling that my entire career as a DP shooting film, it was fighting against the grain, and now my entire career as a DP is trying to get that feeling that the grain had,
Yeah.
that we lost forever, and it's not just as easy as adding grain on top. So
No.
it's like it would just flip the entire thing.
Yeah.
And I understand what both of your point with the lenses. I just have the I'm just think that not being able to be sharp when I need to is not
Yeah.
good for me.
And I
That's
agree with
that's
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, you got two sets of lenses. That'll
Yeah.
be ideal, but not always possible. But if I can't have two sets of lenses, I will go for the sharper ones.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I've
I'll
definitely
say.
made the mistake of choosing a set that was too crazy or too soft. And then, you know, looking at that footage later, especially because, you know, I find myself, you know, operating off of some tiny monitor because I'm mostly doing my own operating. So I'm not getting the ability to be sitting at some nice 20-inch, you know, Flanders monitor and watch it. And then like looking at it finally on a big screen and being like, oh shit. So, you know, I try to be more aware of it now, shoot a little deeper into the lens. If I'm doing something, you know, old or especially wonky, and then maybe like only opening up when it's a creative choice for that part of the story. Um, But, sometimes, especially on these like lower budget projects and your like limitations in the lighting, like you're forced to shoot wide open because that's all the light you have or whatever. So, yeah, it's nice when you can like be that specific about the choices shot to shot, but sometimes hard to do.
Yeah, no, I've done the same thing. I shot a music project years and years and years ago on these old Russian anamorphic zooms, which I thought were going to be incredible. And then, yeah, you see the final product and you're like, did was it not in focus? Or no, it just, you could never get it in
Yeah,
focus,
that's as
even at
close as
like
it
a
gets.
even at
Yeah.
like a 4.5, almost 5.6. You're like, it just doesn't, yeah, it doesn't resolve.
Yeah. I mean, and I love like a 35 millimeter film shot on, crystal sharp lenses, like the look of a person's face in with that lineup of, camera and lens like is amazing. I just don't get to shoot on 35 millimeters. So,
Yeah. I mean, like Wanmi was
I'm
saying, that's had its own built-in filter that we just don't have anymore. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate.
So Alexa, you mentioned that you wanted to make movies since you were 10.
Yeah. I
Uh,
like
what?
when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, I was like really into the books and I watched like all the special features on the DVDs, which was also a conversation I was having somebody recently about like the fact that it's so sad that we don't have like physical media anymore because of special features. Like
Hmm.
what a cool thing that was. It's like you put in the movie and you're really excited to like watch that one movie. You didn't just spend 10 hours scrolling through the endless bowels of Netflix and never make a decision about what to watch. And then you get to the end of the movie and you're so excited about it. And then there's like this whole other menu of cool things. And then you're like, because you just watched the movie and because you were excited about it, you like spend the next 3 hours like watching every little documentary bit about how they made it. Like, I miss that so much.
I went back to that. I When I want to watch a movie now, I go to the public library here in
Mm,
Cincinnati,
nice.
and if they have it in the library, I go and take the Blu-ray or the DVD because of that. Because
Yeah.
I like I'm enjoying the process again of just have the physical thing, putting it in there, and having a purpose watching that movie. Like I want to watch that movie specifically, not scroll.
Yeah.
And then the super cool uh, add-ons and the super cool documentaries after that. That's something that I recently got back in my life, and I'm very happy about it actually.
Yeah, the library is a great idea. Like, I feel like I do own some Blu-rays, and what I tend to do is, especially when I'm prepping for a bigger project, like either a short I'm super excited about or a feature, I'll buy Blu-rays of some of the reference films, partially because I want to have that like material they have in there about how they were made. And also just because I think that like it's a nicer way for me to like connect to the movie if it's a major reference. Um, but yeah, I mean, but they're also expensive, and I should really do the library thing because also that just seems fun. Like I miss, Blockbuster too, and being like, going through the aisles and choosing. But then also like you can't spend 3 hours in Blockbuster, unlike, you know, the menus of Netflix.
Yeah. We're missing that. Yeah, I remember Blockbuster in my town. You'd always have the guy behind the counter who's like, "Oh, you
Yeah,
liked
watch
RoboCop?
that one.
You might like this one too." It's like you don't get that anymore. Yeah,
Yeah,
the human to
exactly.
human thing.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, actually, I also have been recognizing about myself lately is that I hardly watch movies at home. Like, I'll watch TV, and usually, honestly, like sitcoms or like, it's like TV is like my turn off the brain. But if I'm gonna watch a movie, I have to go to the theater because in this day and age of distraction and short term, focusability, like that's the thing that makes me be able to like really focus on watching a whole movie and actually get something from it and not be distracted. And I like love the experience of like feeling the audience in the film, and how that changes the viewing experience. And I've like almost given up on watching movies at home, and I'm just trying to get to the movie theaters, like, at least once a week kind of thing.
So before, sorry, I interrupted you when you were saying that the Lord
Oh,
of the Rings is what triggered your
yeah, well, I
interest in
like
making movies.
the books, and I love the movies, and then, I got the fancy, extended edition DVDs or whatever, and I watched all the, like, 13 hours of special features that they put on those. And I was like in 5th grade, I think, so whatever age that is, but um it was the first time that I recognized that you could make movies, like that was a job that people had.
Hmm.
I mean, like, I'm sure I had some conception of it, but I just like had never really like seen it happening. Um, and I was like, oh, this, like, I want to do this. I didn't have any idea like what I wanted to do in it. And then I went to a public school, but we actually had like two like video production, like elective classes you could take in 7th grade and 8th grade. And so I took those and I was just like, that was it, you know? Um, but I didn't actually like even know what cinematography was basically until I was in college. Like I didn't have much. I don't know, it was weird. I actually like worked as a production assistant on a couple like indie features that were happening in like San Francisco and in my town when I was like 15. Like before I could drive, my parents would drop me off at set. Um, and so, and I was like really excited to be on set. Didn't matter what I was doing. Um, but yeah, but it wasn't until like really my freshman, even sophomore year of college that I started like actually having a real understanding of like what the actual positions were on films and what I might want to do. And one of my like still very close friends that I went to school with, he like, I don't know why exactly or how, but like knew what a DP was and had been reading ASC magazine since he was like in high school, and was like, here, look at this. And here's Deacon's website and here's ASC mags, and I was like, oh, I want to do this. But
Man, what's is there? I feel like we've all, maybe I'm wrong, but I've got like a genre. I've got genres that I would love to work in, or if I could only shoot one thing for the rest of my life, like mine.
yeah, what's
I would
yours?
love to shoot a I would love to shoot a western first of all,
Me too.
but if I could only ever do one thing for the rest of my life, it would be probably sci-fi horror would be the genre, kind of like
Ooh.
Alien, that style. That's my thing.
Yeah, but
But
you got to do like
what's
the old ones because they were cooler.
yeah, cool. But anything again, Juan and I are talking before the show that plays on like the deeper, darker parts of being a human being and like what makes us tick. Like that's kind of what I dig. And fear, I think, is the kind of root of all that. But where would you go? Like, is it rom? It's probably rom coms, right?
Yeah, definitely. Um, um, like we love a good rom-com.
We
I think
do,
that's a
actually.
dying art, actually, is the
Yeah, it's
rom-com.
tough.
Um, Westerns are like a big one for me. I grew up in not exactly like rural California, but in the hills, and like grew up riding horses. Almost went into that as a career. Actually started my real like biggest sets I had ever been on was as a horse wrangler. Um, I like started working with some film horse trainers when I was in college, and then yeah, I was like working on Warner Brothers movies and the Nick and television shows and stuff as a wrangler, like when I first got to the city and while I was still in school. Um, so, and I'm like from out west. I like love backpacking, rock climbing. Like all I want to do is be in the mountains and like the real mountains, not the East Coast mountains.
Hmm.
um, and so I feel like westerns are just like everything that I love. Um, but so if somebody wants me to shoot a western, I would love that. Putting that out there into the world on this podcast. And yeah, I mean, like I think like a fantasy movie would be really cool, but I feel like I so rarely actually like them that it would be hard to get one that I felt like confident enough in that it would be worth doing. And honestly, I just like a good drama too. I don't uh I think if the script's really great, like I would be happy to shoot it kind of thing. How about you, on me?
I don't know. If I had to choose one, just for the rest of my life, I think I will choose thrillers.
Hmm.
Cool.
But because normally thrillers have a nice combination of good stories and interesting visuals,
Yeah.
uh, but it's really difficult. I want to shoot a western too. I want to shoot a sci-fi movie. I want to shoot a musical.
A musical,
Please,
really?
yeah, I want to shoot a
Oh,
musical, but like the in the 50s, like Barsby Berkeley kind of musical with lots of dancers and lots of color and cinemascope and stuff like that. I would love to.
that would be amazing. I mean, like, not for me, but I would love that for you.
Yeah, but I mean, basically, I want to shoot interesting stories. No, that's what we all want, right? It's you want to shoot a story that a story that basically makes some kid in California or in Hungary go like, I want to do that when I grow up. I want to make movies. That happened to me with Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, that was
Exactly,
your Lord of the Rings.
same. I mean, when you were describing your thing, it was the exact same thing for me. I want to do
Yeah,
that when I grew up, and I did think that only was one guy who was the director and the actors. That was it. And then
yeah.
suddenly I discovered, no, there's more people. There's a guy moving the camera, and there's a guy who's lighting, and there's props and stuff like that. And but why did we choose being DPs and not directors when we started so young, being uh, wanting to make movies? Did you ask that yourself? Because when I when I thought I want to make movies when I grow up, and I think that it was exactly the same thing for you. You did think I want to direct movies. The first
Yeah.
thing, no?
Well, actually, I think I specifically wanted to make bigatures.
Pictures.
Like, no, bigatures. Like in The Lord of the Rings,
Oh
they
yeah.
Ah,
built these
okay,
like huge models of like the cities
okay,
and stuff.
okay, good. Yeah.
And then I think I realized that that's not a job that like, you can do on that many movies.
But it's a very cool job, though.
Yeah. But then I decided I would probably be a director, yeah. After the bigatures obsession.
Nice. I wanted to be a marine biologist, so there you go.
So when did you switch over?
Midway through college.
Ooh, late.
I know. Everybody's got all these stories of wanting to I don't know if it wasn't like just a limit of exposure to movies early on. I mean, I have
That's it.
memories of watching like Total Recall with my dad and stuff, but yeah, it didn't really hit for me until later on. I think I needed that process to become more aware and they'd be like, yeah, okay, if I'm this life is very short, that is what I want to do. Yeah, it just took a second.
I'm wondering because I don't know, maybe Alexander, you don't have this if given your journey, but well, I mean, did you have like so you have the movie like Raiders of the Lost Ark is like the movie that, got you into like, oh, movies are a thing that you could have as a job. But did you have that movie that was still kind of early on, but made you be like, oh, and movies are like more than blockbusters? Like they can
uh,
move you in a way or like speak, or be something like different than you thought they could be. Because I like also
yeah,
really distinctly remember like that moment too.
yeah. That happened in my case. That happened in the Spanish TV, actually, the public TV. When I was a kid, there were only two channels in Spain, Channel
Hmm.
One and Channel Two. And in Channel Two, I think there was on Thursday nights uh, a program called Cine Club, and they will every Thursday they will project movies from Russian movies or the German expressionism uh,
Cool.
or I don't know, comedy, English comedies like the Erling comedies and stuff like that. They had curated a great program, and every Thursday was something which now I realize, or in the when I started making movies, I realized that I was watching masterpieces without knowing that I was watching masterpieces.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what caught me the interest. Like, oh, I love watching the Gremlins, and because I was like 13 or 12, something like kind of that age, and I was loving the Gremlins and Star Wars and that kind of stuff. But then suddenly I started watching those movies, and I started watching the Stagecoach, or Rio Bravo, or M. that those kind of movies. And I that's when I realized, oh, there's something more than blockbusters and just fun. There's another kind of art. Actually, I discovered black and white movies. I didn't know that
Yeah.
that was a thing also. So, and I was, I will watch my parents will send me to bed at 9, and that
Hmm.
program will start at 9. So
Oh.
I will sit in my bedroom and watch with the door ajar and
Oh
watch the
my God.
movie, and the TV was sideways to me. It wasn't flat. So I will just basically listen to the movies because I couldn't really see a lot, and I will fall asleep many nights just
Oh.
just on the door trying to watch, I don't know,
I feel like
Frankenstein
that
or
is like
whatever.
an adorable
Wow.
short film in itself. Like,
Yeah, it's like the Spanish version of Cinema Paradiso.
exactly.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's just the most amazing image.
Little Juan me peeking on his parents watching a movie.
yeah.
Just like falling asleep in the door frame,
In the door from, yeah, yeah.
I love it.
And like mom comes in and like puts you in bed because they know what's
Every
up.
night, yeah, every Thursday, yeah. That's she knew I was there, obviously.
Oh, that's great.
Oh.
My I had the moment when I figured out it was more and where I really kind of took a huge interest. I decided to switch over to film or video production in college,
Mhm.
but I took a Japanese cinema class and we
Oh,
started
cool.
watching like Kurosawa films and that kind of spiraled into Korean stuff and Old Boy and all these different country films, and I was like, that was the oh shit moment. Like, whoa, this is way deeper than Die Hard or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it was the foreign stuff really. And then that kind of backtracked into like, okay, the Criterion Collection and going down kind of that path. But
Yeah, I think
uh,
mine was pretty young. Like, I don't know. I feel like I must have been like 12 or something like that. My my dad showed me um Harold and Maude and Run Lola Run.
Wow.
And those were both like Run Lola Run, obviously. I mean, again, foreign film, but like the structure, and then Harold and Maude, just like, I mean, I still love that movie so much.
Me too. Me too. I love it.
um,
I love
yeah,
it.
it's one of my favorites. It happens to like take place where I grew up, basically. And it's just so strange. Like, I think it just like really like my sense of humor, and that kind of like dark comedy human story. Um, but yeah, those two definitely made like big impressions on me, and I saw them pretty young.
And being to want to be in a movie set since that young age, how was the first time you actually were in a movie set with a camera that you were controlling? How was that?
I mean, it's hard to like say what moment that was because like and my parents got me like I think like that next year after the Lord of the Rings debacle, like the thing I asked for Christmas was a little like mini DV like handy cam. And so like I had a camera in my hand making whatever with my friends, like almost right away after deciding that it was like something that I wanted to do. And I think that's like in some ways kind of the interesting thing is even though I didn't know what a DP was and I sort of maybe thought that like directing was what I wanted to do because I knew what it was, I was always the person with the camera in my hand. Um, and even in like I don't know, we did this kind of like, I think it was for my seventh grade, that like first little video production class I did. Like we basically like all worked together to like make a documentary like about the school. Um, and I think I did more of the actual filming of it. It was like somebody else gave me the assignment. It's just a documentary, but like I was the one doing the most of the like going around and filming things and like, getting up early or late at night to get the like B-roll shots of like, the sun coming up over the classrooms and the, like camera in hand. So, and then I took a black and white film photography class, like a community college class when I was in high school and like did my own developing and stuff. And so I think even though I didn't know what a DP was, like I was sort of already doing it. And even like my high school only had like one video production class, like just 1 year of it. And I did it. And I feel like I was really struggling with like coming up with ideas for movies. So I'd end up just kind of doing sort of like visual essay type things. And they weren't any good. um, but but it was basically just like, oh, a song I like and some, images that feel emotional, because I just didn't really actually want to direct. Like I just wanted to shoot cool things. Um, so yeah, I think it's hard for me to like pinpoint a specific moment. I mean, I guess like probably probably the first time I felt like I was really a DP was that I studied a semester in Prague at FAMU.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the project that I like was the cinematographer on while I was there was like the first time I really like had a crew of people who were, in film school, so theoretically kind of knew what they were doing, and we were shooting on film, so it was like 16 millimeter, and I felt like I had like lights and I had like decisions to make and I had a crew. So maybe that was like the first time I really like felt like a DP, because I went to Bard College, which is like a small liberal arts school, and it's a really experimental film program. And I was actually very frustrated by it while I was there, even though in retrospect I learned some very important things. Especially like the film history there is really amazing. Um, but it wasn't a school that was like encouraging you to like work as a crew. It was like a school that was encouraging you to like run off into the woods and make some sort of like personal essay piece. And so I was very frustrated because I was like, at that point I was like, no, I really want to like work with a crew and like be, lighting, using lights, and, making decisions and having, a schedule or whatever. And I wasn't getting that much of that at school, but at FAMU, like, it was structured more that way.
Nice. You mentioned documentary earlier. Is that anything that you would ever consider, or any interest in tackling as a DP?
Um,
Or is it strictly narrative?
I'm not like, I've done a little bit of documentary, though it's all been the stuff that I've been more excited about on that end. It's like documentary, and it can be so many different things. Like there's actually a short documentary that maybe still isn't, I think the trailer for it's on my website, but it's called Tuning Renee Marie, and it's about this amazing jazz musician who just has the most in, cool, interesting, like difficult life story and journey to music, and is like a like multi Emmy nominated jazz musician now. And it's about her early life, but we like went to the town that she lived in, just me and a friend, and we got a little bit of film and an SR3, and filmed plates, basically like moving plates, in the place that she grew up in Virginia. Um, and these sort of like fallen apart places, like the first place she had played a show and things, but they're all like turned into other things or like dilapidated now. And then the director had an animator do like line drawn animation over the plates, um, very like sort of just like white lines, very like rough sketches with like a lot of energy, in some sort of like moving in the same way that the grain moves in the film. And then it's like the voiceover of this musician telling her life story over these images, and then a little bit of footage of her now at the end. And it's a short, but like, I like love that project, and her voice is just like the most, I mean, you could just listen to it forever. And like that's like my friend like sent me literally like a single line from a Zoom interview that they had done when they were like, she was starting to prep the project, and I like listened to it like rushing to something in my car, and I was like just listening to one sentence that Renee Marie said. I was like, I literally like pulled the car over and like texted my friend immediately. I was like, I will do anything to be a part of this project. So like
Cool.
every once in a while, some doc project will like get me in that way, and I'm like totally in it. But I find them, I'm really curious actually, if either of you have done any doc work, how you feel about this. I feel very unmoored shooting them generally, because I'm such a planner in the narrative world, and I like want to know when to turn the camera on and when to turn the camera off and what to
Hmm.
point it at and have some control over that. And I think it's an amazing skill if you're somebody who like as things are happening can be making those decisions both about like what's the best image but also like what's the most important thing to be shooting right now and also like when can I take a break. And I just feel like I don't have that sense, or I find it very exhausting kind of to be trying to do that. And so I think that that generally makes me like, unless I'm super, super passionate about the project, or maybe it's a documentary that's in a bit of an odd style, um, makes me kind of shy away from them.
I never shot a documentary. I would love to, but I never done it.
Really? Like ever?
No, ever. I worked in a documentary when I was a focus puller, and but I always do narrative or commercials or music videos. But the
Interesting.
funny thing is that every time I think when I think of me as a director, like I go like, what if I direct something? Most of the time, I think in documentaries.
Hmm.
I don't think
Interesting.
in feature films. I will. I would like to shoot or direct this, and it's always like the story of a bluesman or a musician or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I never done it before. I don't know. Uh, I don't even know the process of being a DP for a documentary.
I've worked on a couple, and just as an operator, and
Hmm.
I've shot a few shorts, and it's exactly that. I feel way more anxious in those scenarios than on like a large set where you've prepped it and you know exactly what you're gonna do, and you can make artistic decisions. Where it's just like on edge. Oh shit, something's gonna happen. I don't know when. Especially the moments that aren't just sit down interviews,
Yeah.
it like makes my skin crawl. Like, oh, we're not gonna get it. We might not get it,
Yeah. I'm
but I
always
know
like, did
some
I
people,
roll the
some
camera?
yeah, but some DPs and some directors and people like thrive on that. They're like, ooh, we get one shot. Like, it's kind of like that second unit vibe where like we gotta get it right the first time without the planning. you
And
know?
without the six cameras usually too, you know.
Yeah,
Like maybe
yeah,
you have
Re-
two, but
really,
yeah.
without the planning? I mean,
No,
a
it's there's
documentary
certain.
is a movie. It's a movie like a fiction movie. What you choose to be to what you choose to cut and to put in the movie, and what you choose not to, it's forcing the story one way or the other, right?
yeah, but you're
Sure,
having to
So
there's
make those
certain.
decisions in real time, sometimes at
well,
least.
yeah,
Yeah, the scenarios I'm referring to are yeah where we know we have to capture like this woman going into this space and she's gonna have this conversation. We're not sure exactly where it's gonna go. Be prepared. Like that idea is ugh,
Or like even
don't
more
enjoy
if
it.
you get into that situation and it becomes a conversation between two people and you are only have a single camera and you're like,
Yeah,
all right, do I shoot this all in a two shot? Is that going to tell a story? Am I doing swingles? But then I'm like hoping that I'm catching the right moments. Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
stressful.
Again, it's there. You can tell a great story and be part of a great story in documentary, but I don't know. I tend towards the. I'd rather put a little more artistic craft into it. Not that you can't do that in docs, but
Yeah, I mean, there are
it's
also the people who seem to
tougher.
manage to do that on top of
Yeah.
knowing what to point at when I think especially also like you take certain ownership as the DP in a way that sometimes also kind of scares me in that where you're like, well, I'm choosing when to roll and where to point and like
Hmm.
I hopefully have talked to the director a lot and I understand what they're going for in this, but like I'm in the one who's going to have to be the one actually making those split second decisions, you know. And that's
that's cool.
it's
That's
cool,
great.
but it's a lot of responsibility too.
I mean, when you're shooting a movie and somebody's trusting you 30 or 12 or 5 or 6 or $3 million, it's a big responsibility too.
Hmm.
So you have to be used to that, no? If in our business you have to be used to carry that weight. So it's just a
Yeah.
fun responsibility, I would
I'm
say.
I'm curious. I have a question for you guys. So one of the I think like best early pieces of advice I got from another DP when I was still in college, but who was already like, working professionally. Um, was basically that I should really understand if I wanted to eventually become a DP that the job is 80% politics and 20% actually doing your job.
Hmm.
And I'm curious both like one, I assume at least that you found this to be true because I certainly have, but also like that was something you realized going into it, like how you feel about it now, how you handle that side of the job when so often I think all we actually want to do is just like tell cool stories and make pretty images and wish everybody would just leave us alone to do that. I don't know. Curious your
Uh,
experience
I mean,
there.
I think it's true to an extent. I think 80-20 is way too much. I think it's at most 50-50, and but yes, there's a big component of politics. Politics meaning that this is first of all, it's when we're shooting a movie, we're shooting a director's movie or a producer's movie, so we don't own the movie, so we have to uh, try to understand what the director has in their mind, and then just vomit images, no, through that. And sometimes that is easy and pleasant, and sometimes it's more difficult because there is no an understanding or not, or there's a different point of view and stuff like that. So that's what I understand as politics. Same with the producers. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I will say in my case, I just learned to live with it, and I'm okay with it. It's
Mhm.
just it's just the way it is. I try to pay a lot of attention, or try to have my mind like fully in the creative part, and do as little politics as I can, as they allow
Do
to
you
me.
find it also with like crew, not just the people above you, but also like because you're working with quite a large team below you and managing like those relationships as well?
Yeah, yeah, that's part of it. I mean, at the end of the day, the DP it has a lot of people under their their wing,
And you spend a lot of
and
the budget, like you were saying before,
and you spend a lot
somebody's
of
handing you
budget,
some multi-million dollar movie and a lot of that
and
is going towards your choices.
it's every human under your wing. It has an ego, and it has a dream, and it has a career, and it has a family. So yeah, you have to be understanding all those things. That's in my case. That's why I tend to work with the same people always, because I know them, they know me, I know their strengths and their weaknesses, and they know my strengths and my weaknesses, and that's very important to me. So I tend to repeat as much as I can, repeat my crew. So I like to work with friends. Uh, but yeah, I mean, an elevated percentage of politics in this, but not politics. In my opinion, politics it's not necessarily a bad word. I mean,
No,
there's a
maybe
lot.
that word has such a terrible context these days
Mhm.
that it's not the
Yeah,
right word to choose anymore.
yeah.
This
It
was a
has.
conversation many, many years ago. So,
Yeah, no, and we still keep saying no. This is the politics part of it, but uh, I will say that I learned to live with it, and I'm okay with it. It's just
mhm.
I don't know for you, Alex. Which I'm old, and I've been in this.
Yeah, you've, but again, I think that comes with age and wisdom, is the kind of thicker skin and saying it like it is thing. That's the part that's probably gotten me the most, and that I struggle with is I think I'm a little more of a softer human being. And so I struggle when I know that there's drama in the crew side of things and people are at each other's throats and oh, he doesn't like him. And then oh, the salesmanship aspect of hey, we need this for that scene. And sometimes a producer, a line producer, or somebody's like, well, why?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I can tell you technically why, for sure, absolutely, and because this is what the director needs. But then inevitably there's this, well, really sell it to me kind of thing, and you're like, this is getting uncomfortable. But it just comes with the territory, like Wanmi's saying. But that's the political aspect is something that I've always hated. I've always found myself pretty good at despite hating it. And
Yeah.
like you said, it just kind of comes with the territory, and you get better at it as you go. But yeah, I just want to make pretty pictures. I don't want to like.
Yeah, but to make pretty pictures, you need
You gotta sell it,
some
yeah.
person or some company to give you $10 million.
Oh, I know.
And
Yeah.
I
Very
never
aware.
I never
Yeah.
came across anyone who gives you $10 million and say, I don't give a fuck what you do with them. Just have fun. Never in
No,
my career.
no.
So
Those people.
No, totally.
yeah, unfortunately, I have to say. But,
Yeah. Every once in a
Yeah.
while, you might get so lucky, but
yeah.
No, never gonna happen. But yeah, that's the tougher part than actually making the pretty picture.
yeah. I mean, like, there are elements of that that I like. I definitely have talked to friends because I have a lot of friends still who are in, like, the crewing world. And sometimes they're like, yeah, for a little bit I thought about being a DP, but then like basically looked at that side of it and was like, I don't want anything to do with that. And I think that I like creative conversations with interesting, talented people, and I like creative problem solving too. So when you're with, even if it's a producer, like a producer who really is good at their job and wants to support the creative side of things, but you both have to sort of come together and come up with a solution because there's limited resources. Like, that can be a really exciting part of the job. I don't always hate it by any means.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just interesting to recognize, I think, how much of my day is often spent on that side of it, and how much of my day these days is also spent on the other end of that, which is getting jobs in the first place, getting your name out there, you know, getting to, keeping up with your network, all of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I feel like, especially when you add the time spent off of jobs with that side of being on jobs, I still kind of stand by the 80-20 percentage.
So let's say, Alexa, tomorrow our dear Sarah calls you and say, "Hey, I got a script for you. This is a perfect movie. It's a great story, great director. Uh, what would you like to try? Is there any direction that you want to take in your career, lighting wise? I mean, like, I want to try this, or I want to try to shoot darker, or I want to try to shoot, uh, assuming that the story allows that.
Yeah.
Is something that you haven't done that you want to start digging in, or
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's just one thing. I think there's so many things.
I imagine.
Yeah, like, I mean, definitely, I think that partially out of choices I've made with like the types of cameras I own and have shot with a lot, and and doing more like narratives and short films instead of music videos or commercials. I think that I haven't had the resources for like moving the camera in as many ways as you can. Like, certainly like cranes or just like vertical shots in general, or projects where I get to have like, an actual dolly with a boom, like, through the whole project, or, you know, high quality like drone footage, whatever it is. And I think that I love handheld, and I've relied a lot on handheld in my career to create projects with energy and life to them in the camera when the story called for it, without having like the tools to sort of move the camera in more interesting ways. I think partially because also I'm one of those people who, like, some people are willing to be like, well, this shot should really be a dolly shot, like 100%, but we have a Movi and that's the tool we have. And so we're going to do it on a Movi anyway, even though you're going to get some weird jitter in the camera, or you're going to feel the operator steps or something. And I'm just like not the sort of person who generally will like do that. If I think that we don't have the right tool, then we're doing a different shot, kind of thing. Like, we're finding a different way to tell the story with the tools we have, which, like, maybe sometimes I shouldn't be as strict about it. But so I think definitely, like, as I get on projects, hopefully with bigger budgets and, the ability to have those tools, I think that like being able to be more creative in my shot design, and also like what that allows for the blocking and the storytelling, um, with more tools to move the camera, is definitely something I'm like really interested in. and I think would be like a challenge for me because I've spent so long like just not thinking in those terms. Oh, my lights are turning off. Um, and then I think that on the lighting side, I mean, something we sort of touched on earlier is being a little bolder in my lighting choices. When I feel like a project can kind of handle that, whether that's color or quality, or, you know, even transitions within a scene. I think that is just like an amazing emotional tool. I was watching, Wami, have you met Fletcher Wolf?
No.
She's also rep by Sarah, so you've
Uh-huh.
probably seen her at a Christmas party or something.
Okay.
But she's an amazing DP and also somebody who's given me a lot of opportunities in my career, both when she was gaffing and I was an electric, and since she started shooting, hiring me to operate. Um, and she's an amazing DP in her own right. But I just like happened to see a short film of hers that I think played at Sundance recently, and like there's just like a scene, I mean, they're in a bowling alley, you can kind of justify some weird lighting. And there's like a scene where one of the characters is like down a hallway and, they had like basically like a green light above her head and a red light down the hallway. And actually one of my regular gaffer was gaffing this project. Um and like, it kind of made sense. It didn't really make sense for what was going on, but it was like a choice that those colors sort of meant something for the character and the character's journey, and were used at other points in the film, and it worked. And I think that like being bold about making those kinds of choices is something I'd like to like also explore more. And then also randomly just volumes. Like I feel like LED walls are one of those tools that are going to become more and more used, already are, and just I haven't really been on projects yet that had the budget or necessity for them. But I may have a feature this year that has a lot of driving stuff, and I think that might be the right tool for it and would be an exciting thing for me to like learn a lot more about. So that's, yeah, one of the other ones.
Nice. Wanmi, you've done some volume stuff, yeah?
I've done a lot, yeah, especially
Good.
with
I'll call
cars.
you if we end
Yeah,
up doing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
anytime. Yeah, I have really good experiences with the volume. Yeah. Well, Alexa, thank you so much for sharing your this time with us. It's been fantastic.